Somewhere along the Mississippi coast, in the past few weeks, a handful of families opened an envelope they never expected to receive. Inside was a letter from an attorney, formal, precise, addressed to them by name.
Parents of Nolan Wells' friends and local officials were reportedly sent notices of intent informing them to expect lawsuits in connection with the investigation surrounding Wells' death.
It didn't accuse them of a crime. It didn't summon anyone to court. But it carried an instruction that changed how they'd spend the rest of this summer.
According to our media partner, the Sun-Herald, those letters were sent by a Richland law firm, Carroll Bufkin PLLC, who is working alongside civil rights attorney Ben Crump. It is unclear at this time who exactly received these letters, but we do know they instruct recipients to immediately preserve all evidence in their possession in its original form and directs those recipients to suspend any automatic deletion or overwrite functions that could destroy evidence.
Preserve everything, every message, every photo, every video, because legal action may be coming. And this letter hadn't come from a stranger. It had been sent, through a grieving family's attorneys, by the parents of a boy their own sons once called a friend. That boy was Nolan Wells, 18 years old, a football player, a friend, the kind of young man his community would later describe as someone who filled a room, who went out on the 4th of July to spend a holiday with people he trusted and never came home. For weeks, the public was handed a simple version of what happened to him next, a boat trip, a tragic accident. Nothing more, nothing hidden, nothing left to explain. Tonight, that version is being challenged, formally, by the two people who love Nolan more than anyone. This is a true crime investigation that's still very much unresolved, and some of what we're about to walk through is difficult to sit with. If it has your attention the way it has ours, go ahead and subscribe now, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from tonight. Because a case like this deserves witnesses, not just viewers. Nolan's parents were never able to accept the simple version. Not because they were hunting for a villain hiding inside an otherwise innocent afternoon. Grief doesn't work that way. It doesn't settle for an explanation with visible gaps still sitting inside it. And this explanation had gaps from the beginning. So they waited. They asked questions nobody seemed able to fully answer. They watched an official investigation move at the pace official investigations move, methodical, procedural, careful. And to a mother and father with only one question left in the world, almost unbearably slow.
We will not be distracted. We are ready to do whatever we need to do as his parents to continue advocating for him because Nolan is not here. He is not here to speak for himself. He is not here to tell us what happened. So again, we will not rest until we get answers. And if you know something, you need to let us know. Please do not be afraid.
She has said it plainly, more than once. The only thing she has ever wanted is to know what happened to her son. Not who deserves blame, just the truth. And week after week of getting nothing back, she said, has taken a toll on her family that's hard to put into words. So the waiting ended. Through their legal team, Nolan's parents took the first formal legal step toward a wrongful death lawsuit. Not against a stranger, and not against a distant institution, but against the very friends who were with their son in his final hours, and against those friends' own families. The letters went out quietly, the way so many consequential things do, arriving without warning and without spectacle. According to Magnolia Tribune, which obtained a copy, some of them arrived on the same day Nolan was laid to rest. While one family buried a son, other families, only miles away, were opening envelopes instructing them to hold on to every piece of evidence they had. It matters to understand exactly what this step is, and just as much, what it isn't. It is not a lawsuit that's been filed. It is not a criminal charge, and it is not, in any legal sense, a finding that anyone did anything wrong. What it is, in its purest form, is an instruction. Do not let anything disappear. Every text message, every phone record, every photograph and video from that day and the days that followed. Any automatic deletion setting that could quietly erase potential evidence before a courtroom ever gets to examine it. Suspended, immediately, no exceptions. It's the quiet, procedural first move families take when they believe a wrongful death claim may be coming. And it's a signal, unmistakable in its own way, that Nolan's parents no longer trust this case to resolve itself on someone else's timeline, But the notice was never the whole story. In the weeks since, a disputed recording has resurfaced, one that investigators and forensic experts themselves can't agree on. And a second, independent medical review has returned with a conclusion his family says they cannot simply set aside. An official cause of death that remains open, unresolved, unwilling to close. To understand why two grieving parents would turn their legal attention toward their own son's friends, you have to understand what they still can't make peace with, the small handful of details this letter was ultimately built to chase down. Grief that centers this long on one unanswered question tends to fix itself on details everyone else has already moved past. For Nolan's parents, 3 of those details never stopped gnawing at them. The official account says Nolan chose, on his own, to stay behind on the island when his friend's boat turned back, that the group didn't leave him. They had to, because their boat was taking on water. His parents have never accepted that account.
Just know we will not be distracted. We are ready to do whatever we need to do as his parents to continue advocating.
Staying behind, alone, on a remote barrier island isn't something they believe their son would have chosen, not the boy they raised. Then there's the phone. When that boat reached the mainland that evening, Nolan's cell phone came back with it, sitting in a boat that no longer had Nolan aboard it. Friends have said the explanation is simple. He left it behind on purpose to keep it dry, and it was returned to his family afterward. To his parents, that explanation has never fully settled. And the third detail is quieter, but in some ways, louder. In the hours surrounding Nolan's disappearance, his phone shows no social media activity at all. No posts, no stories, nothing. On a holiday everyone else around him was documenting in real time. His parents have called that silence out of character and deeply suspicious. 3 details, none of them proof of anything on their own. Together, they're the reason 2 grieving parents stopped waiting on someone else's timeline and started building their own. That is the story behind the 10-page letter, now sitting in the hands of Nolan's friends and their families. According to Magnolia Tribune, which obtained a copy, the letter is exhaustive by design. It doesn't ask recipients to hand anything over yet. It orders them to hold on to it. Text messages, group chats, emails, phones and laptops themselves, every social media account, every photo and video from that day and the days after, even boat maintenance records and fuel purchase receipts, the kind of granular detail that only makes sense if the person writing it is already building toward a courtroom, not simply asking questions. The letter didn't stop at friends either. Reporting on the notices confirms they also reached local law enforcement, the coroner's office, and the state medical examiner's office. Every version of this story that exists, official and unofficial, is now under the same instruction. Nothing disappears. Behind the letter sits a legal team that isn't new to cases like this one. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump, not licensed to practice in Mississippi himself, has partnered with the Ridgeland-based firm Carroll Bufkin. The letter carries the signature of attorney Gary Bufkin, a name already known from some of Mississippi's highest-profile legal battles, including a major public corruption case in the state. This isn't a solo attorney firing off a form letter. It's an experienced team laying groundwork with the kind of precision that suggests they expect to need every page of it. To understand what that groundwork is actually for, you have to understand what a wrongful death claim requires. Proving something tragic happened isn't enough. A family has to establish 2 specific things in a court of law: that someone's actions, or their failure to act, directly contributed to the death, and that measurable damages resulted from it. That's a demanding standard. It runs on documented evidence, not theories, and not the momentum of public attention, however loud that attention has grown online. Every message, every call log, every photo sitting on someone else's device has to survive untouched until the moment it might be needed to meet it. Which is exactly why, in just the past few days, this story has already moved past the letter itself. Court records confirm Nolan's family has now filed formal subpoenas, seeking his account data and records from Snapchat, TikTok, Meta, WhatsApp, and the location tracking app Life 360. This is no longer a request sitting in someone's mailbox. It's a legal order, filed in pursuit of exactly the kind of digital trail that could confirm, or quietly dismantle, everything his parents have suspected since that first night he didn't come home. What those records ultimately show remains unknown tonight, But a family willing to fight through the courts just to see them is telling you, plainly, how far they believe the official story still sits from the truth. So here is where things stand, as plainly as we can state it. A 10-page letter has gone out to Nolan's friends and their families, ordering them to preserve everything. Subpoenas are already reaching into some of the largest technology companies in the world, and a demanding legal bar sits ahead of all of it, waiting to be cleared or not cleared by whatever that evidence finally shows. None of this proves anything happened to Nolan beyond a tragic accident on the water. A notice to preserve evidence is not an accusation. It never has been. But it isn't nothing either. And two pieces of evidence that have already surfaced publicly, a disputed recording that experts themselves can't agree on, and a second medical opinion that refuses to close the door on how Nolan died, are exactly why his parents no longer believe silence is an option. Two pieces of evidence are doing more to drive this case than any letter or subpoena ever could. Both surface publicly within days of each other, and both remain, tonight, exactly where they started, unresolved. Start with the recording. On the afternoon of July 4th, as the boat carrying Nolan's friends began taking on water near Horn Island, a teenager aboard placed a call to a private towing company. The bilge pump had failed, he explained, and the water was coming in faster than the group could manage. He confirmed everyone on board, about 7 people, was fine. He gave coordinates. He asked for a tow. That call was later obtained through a public records request and released by Mississippi's Department of Marine Resources. NBC News independently verified it. What's audible is commotion, multiple voices, a group of teenagers working through a real emergency on open water. For most people who heard that original release, it was exactly what it appeared to be. A distress call, nothing hidden inside it. Then TMZ published a different version.
Nolan Wells' friends talking about him and talking about him possibly being dead while they were on their way back to the mainland from Horn Island. This is all because of some audio that we got from officials down in Mississippi. This audio is a call that's being made from the boat that Nolan's friends were on. So after they were on Horn Island on July 4th, at the end of the day, about 4:30, they decide they're heading back to the mainland. And the owner of that boat, or the grandson of the owner who's driving the boat, realizes that they are taking on water. The bilge pump isn't working, so he places a call to a tow company called Ceto. And while he's on that call, there is a lot of commotion going on. And what people think is that in the background of that call, you can hear someone say, "Is he dead? Nolan. Oh my God." It's really hard to make out. This is what it sounds like.
Ceto Assistance, Vicky speaking. How can I help you? All right, of course. How far is the water coming up, sir?
No, we do not need that.
All right.
No, we do not need that.
Now, there are other parts of the audio where people think they hear the words "check his chest" or "wake up." One thing you can definitely hear clearly is the guy who's calling the tow company says, "Shut the bleep up." Now, he could have been yelling to some people. He does tell the dispatcher that there are about 7 people on board.
The outlet said it had taken that same recording and produced an enhanced copy, and reported that some listeners believed they could make out additional words buried beneath the background noise. Words that, if real, would raise serious questions about what was happening on that boat in the moments surrounding Nolan's disappearance. The claim didn't stay contained. Within days, clips were circulating across social media, slowed down, argued over word by word, by people who'd never heard the original file, only a version someone else had already reshaped. That's exactly the moment a story like this starts running away from the truth. So we're going to slow down here, because what happened next wasn't more speculation. It was a direct, technical examination of the evidence, and it complicates the narrative in a way most headlines left out entirely. A digital forensics expert named Robert Freed was brought in to examine both recordings side by side, the original file and the enhanced version TMZ had published. When his team built their own transcription of the enhanced audio from scratch, they could not corroborate the specific words TMZ had reported. What concerned Freed more, by his own account, was something else. The enhanced file wasn't simply a cleaned-up copy of the original. It ran 20 seconds longer. And its metadata, the hidden technical fingerprint embedded in every digital file, carried a completely different signature. Whatever that file actually was, it was not, in any verifiable sense, just the original recording with the noise stripped away. Freed was careful about how far he'd go. He didn't say the disputed words were fabricated, only that his review couldn't confirm they were there, and that he'd want the original file and its full, unredacted metadata before he'd say anything more definitive. He also raised something worth sitting with. Once people are told exactly what to listen for inside a garbled recording, it becomes remarkably easy to start hearing it, whether or not it's actually there. That's where the recording stands tonight, not confirmed, not disproven. A single piece of audio that has become, in a matter of weeks, nearly as contested as the case it was meant to help explain. Now the second thread. And this one begins not with a recording, but with a body, and the limits of what medicine can tell a grieving family. The state's autopsy was completed within days of Nolan's body being recovered. An answer, by every official measure, already exists, sealed inside a file Mississippi procedure won't release. Not to the press. Not in full, even to the parents who've been waiting on it every day since. It stays sealed until a grand jury has reviewed the entire investigation, a process still without an announced end date. So the family did what families in this position have done before them. Through their legal team, they commissioned an independent second autopsy, conducted by Dr. Roger Mitchell, a board-certified forensic pathologist and president of the National Medical Association. The findings were announced publicly on July 22nd at the NAACP National Convention in Chicago, with Nolan's parents standing beside their attorney as the results were shared for the first time. The conclusion, both the cause and the manner of Nolan's death, remain undetermined, pending further investigation. That word is worth sitting with because it's so often misread, and misreading it is exactly how a case like this gets distorted. Undetermined doesn't mean unexplained. It doesn't mean suspicious. It's a precise, clinical finding. Based on what remained available to examine, the evidence couldn't point conclusively toward any single explanation. Not accident, not anything else either. But the report goes one step further, and it's the step that changed the direction of this entire case. Mitchell found no lacerations, no fractures, no deep tissue injuries anywhere on Nolan's body. What he did find was an area of red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of the head, and by the time his exam took place, certain structures around the neck were no longer available to him, already removed during the state's original autopsy. Because of what he couldn't examine and what he did observe, Mitchell wrote that he could not rule out an injury to the neck as a possible contributing factor. That single finding, buried inside a much longer report, is what carried this story onto national television within 24 hours. But leaving the account there would hand you half a picture dressed up as a whole one. Dr. Priya Banerjee, a board-certified forensic pathologist with no connection to this case, was asked publicly what a second autopsy can and can't reliably establish, and her answer left little room for sensational interpretation. Second examinations, she explained, carry an inherent limitation, simply because of everything a body has already been through by the time they happen. It's not unusual, she said, and not inherently suspicious, for an independent examiner to lack access to tissue already removed during an earlier official procedure. Other forensic pathologists asked about that same discoloration offered a range of honest, competing theories of their own, that it could reflect ordinary decomposition, that it could be lividity, blood settling after death, or that it could point towards some kind of blunt force trauma. No consensus. Just qualified experts looking at the same incomplete picture and reaching different, honest conclusions. So here, with full precision, is where the second thread stands tonight. Not proof, not a determination of how Nolan died. A documented, narrow, professional possibility, sitting directly beside an equally credentialed explanation for why that uncertainty exists at all. Two contested pieces of evidence. Two sets of qualified experts, reading the same incomplete picture differently, and a family, once again, left exactly where they started, without the one answer they've been asking for since the afternoon of July 4th. Take every thread of this case and lay it out together, the way this family has been forced to for weeks now. A 10-page letter ordering Nolan's friends and their families to preserve everything, because a wrongful death claim may be coming. Subpoenas already filed against some of the largest technology companies in the world, reaching for a digital trail no one outside the investigation has been allowed to see. A recording that either captures nothing more than a group of frightened teenagers calling for help, or something far more troubling that one qualified forensic expert says he cannot confirm exists at all, and a second medical opinion that refuses to close the door on how Nolan died, sitting directly beside an equally credentialed explanation for exactly why that door remains open. None of these threads, alone, prove anything. Not the letter, not the subpoenas, not the recording, not the autopsy. The questions that started this, why he stayed behind, why his phone came back without him, why a boy his parents describe as never quiet online went silent for hours that day, remain exactly as open tonight as they were when this story began. But a mother and father don't get to examine their son's death one uncertain thread at a time. They live inside all of it, every day, with no finish line in sight. Understand that, even for a moment. And a decision that from the outside can look aggressive, even adversarial, starts to look like something closer to desperation. Two grieving parents formally preparing to take legal action against the very people their son once called friends. Here's where we'll offer our own read on it, and it's exactly that. A read, not a ruling. A notice to preserve evidence is, at its core, standard legal groundwork. Any competent attorney sends a letter like this the moment a client believes the full picture hasn't yet been shown to them. On its own, it doesn't tell us that anything happened to Nolan beyond a tragic accident on the water. What it tells us is that his parents no longer trust the ordinary process to hand them the whole truth without a fight. Those are two very different things, and this case has spent weeks blurring the line between them. That blurring hasn't stayed confined to comment sections in living rooms. It's playing out with real consequences for real people, most of whom have never been named a suspect by anyone with the actual authority to say so. Somewhere in the space between a family's legitimate search for answers and a public's understandable hunger to solve this case in real time, young people who were simply present on an island over a holiday weekend, and their own families, have found themselves living under a level of scrutiny that no official investigation has ever justified. That tension between the right to ask hard questions and the danger of answering them before the evidence exists may end up being one of the more lasting legacies of this case, whatever else it ultimately proves. So what actually happens from here? Subpoenaed records, once returned, go first to investigators, not to the public. The state's sealed autopsy stays sealed, by law, until a grand jury has reviewed everything every agency involved has gathered. That grand jury doesn't rule on guilt or innocence. Its job is narrower than that. To decide whether what investigators have assembled is enough to justify formal charges against anyone at all. No date for that has been announced. It could be weeks away. It could be longer. And when it happens, it will unfold almost entirely outside public view, which means the answers this family and this audience have been waiting for may not arrive with a press conference. They may arrive quietly, in a decision that either moves this case toward a courtroom or ends it without one. What we do know is smaller and harder to sit with. Nolan Wells was 18, a wide receiver, a student, remembered by the officers who searched for him as a beloved son, teammate, and friend. He went out on a holiday to be with people he trusted, and he never came home. His parents have spent every day since demanding a version of events they can actually live with. Whether the truth turns out to be exactly what the official account has said from the start, or something else entirely, isn't something we get to decide here. It isn't something anyone should claim to know before the people with the actual authority and the actual evidence have finished the work still sitting in front of them. This is a developing case, and it is far from finished. New filings, new records, and eventually a grand jury's decision will keep shaping what the public is allowed to know, and when. We'll keep following it as it happens, honestly, without getting ahead of what's actually been proven. For tonight, what remains is a family still waiting on the one answer they've wanted since the afternoon of July 4th. A legal process built for thoroughness, not speed, grinding forward on its own clock. And a case that, however it eventually ends, has already asked its community, and now the rest of the country watching, an uncomfortable question worth sitting with long after this video ends. How much certainty are we willing to manufacture, when the truth itself is still refusing to arrive?